Yes. Well, welcome you two, and thank you again very much for joining us for this Adult Advocacy Day in regards to peer mediation and restorative practices. So, Sara, I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell everyone about you and what you're doing, and kind of talk about how. Really the three of you, Rafa and Freda and you, got together and started implementing programming really at Fairfax.
So I'm a ninth and 10th grade English teacher, so definitely different than my science peers. But I think that all of us have always cared about using education as a way of empowering our students to be very inquiry minded and also as a way of helping them see themselves in the best possible light. And so it was only natural that if our school is talking about big initiatives like adopting an international baccalaureate program, adopting the middle years program, and trying to start PBIS, the positive behavioral intervention system, that we do the deep work of figuring out how to work from a relational standpoint to make sure that those programs aren't just fancy names that make our campus sound great, but rather that they're really rooted in authentic practices that center student voice and well-being on campus.
Awesome. Yeah. We had the opportunity of doing a ABC's mini. Sometimes what we have found in the last couple of years are people are super overwhelmed and not can't necessarily um, extend their time into a full 4 day, 8 hours of training in the summer. You guys are exhausted, and especially come June, you're like, not another thing. So what we did with you guys, which was unique, was created an ABC's mini, which I think was a bite-sized kind of way to introduce restorative practice and CRE and peer mediation to the faculty. Can you tell me a little bit about what people's feedback and feelings were around that experience with an ABC's mini? And then I'll get into the questions, but I'd really like them to hear people hear that first.
Well, they were pleasantly surprised, I find, because we get various types of professional development. And a lot of it is more of a checklist, making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's and make sure that we are fulfilling on a lot of law, a lot of protecting the children. And this actually was a program that, yes, helps students, but they saw themselves. They saw how they can use it. They saw how they can apply it to their in their classroom. What they also got was a piece of what restorative justice actually looks like, and that they actually have access to it. Because how it was demonstrated or rolled out for us in our school was more like there was a restorative justice teacher and they just took care of the problems, versus it's like a community, and you're building capacity, and we can do as much as we can, and then we can invite the restorative justice teacher, if it's available in your campus, to partner up. We also saw that there's multi levels. We saw that it can not only help the students, but it can help teachers. It can actually have the interpersonal relationship, because every year on almost every campus, at least in LAUSD, you take a survey. And you start to talk about whether or not you feel safe. You start to talk about, do you feel safe around your colleagues? And so having this kind of a program actually gives us the tools, because for quite some time now, we've been experiencing that, we can't speak to each other anymore and actually hear each other, or we're not listening to understand anymore, that we forgot that. It's like everybody's in different camps. So what the mini provided was really like a little bite size, and it made you want to, like, just like a piece of chocolate, like, I can get another piece. And so when we introduce the program again in terms of having it in a class, we're going to have more buy-in. And my whole goal is to reach a critical mass. Once you reach that critical mass, we're going to get to that tipping point, and it's just all downhill. So what do you think, Sarah?
I think another key piece is so often with things like restorative justice circles, like these really student focused conversations, there's a fear that if an administrator walks in, I'll be in trouble because we're not learning things that are standards based. Whereas I think that being able to have our administrator say, yes, you have our support. We think this is valuable. We want not just a few teachers, but as many teachers as are interested to participate in this training, made a lot of teachers who are interested in the ideas of restorative justice and peer mediation feel more comfortable really doing this in real life. I think that a key part of the training was that there was a lot of practice, that we discussed videos, that we worked in little pods with groups to see what would this be like to do with students.
Mm-hmm.
I think that so many district-led PDs are very much you sit and get information. So I think the very hands-on nature of this was important. And as Dr. Antoine mentioned, this was one of the first PDs that we did back on campus with peers who weren't just our departmental peers. So having counselors next to theater teachers, next to science teachers, next to history teachers creates a sense that, wow, there are a lot more people who share the values and priorities I have on campus, other than the folks I might already know and talk to. So I think it created a tremendous sense of what is possible on our campus that we hadn't had before gathering in this way.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you very much. That was very informative. And I hope people receive it the way that I'm thinking that question should be received, or, I want to ask you, though, this. One of the questions that we really didn't get a chance to ask you in the main stage was, what challenges are you facing? And what do you think conflict resolution and peer mediation can help address some of those challenges?
I think probably the primary challenge is that there are programs that have a fundamental overlap with peer mediation, conflict resolution, but aren't linked in an explicit way. So I think drawing those connections to show how does this program that we as teachers are advocating to roll out on our campus overlap with the things that are the priorities of the district and the administration. I think showing that this is a program that will enhance rather than detract from existing initiatives has been our primary issue. That as we're thinking about what courses do students need to take for international baccalaureate in terms of middle years program, figuring out where can we add a new class? How will this enhance capacity of students and teachers rather than be something that stands in conflict is our biggest issue. And I think also another one is just as teachers, there are so many different plates rolling around that it's hard to say this is going to be the number one thing that we're going to advocate for and fight for this year.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Freda, would you answer the same question?
Well, the other thing I wanted to add to is as teachers, we consistently are giving templates and more curriculum frameworks and more of these things. And it was nice to have this connecting piece. It was nice to have something where it was more like it has different tentacles that can bring in all of them together and show that that there is a flow through it. And so one of the things that we're looking at is in our schools, like the IB profile, and really getting that a student is more than just a vessel of information that we just pour down their throat. And one of the things that peer mediation will provide is a sense of identity. So, and, identity has so many different ways. There's just so many different ways to describe it or explain it. And if they can have the program, what it provides is the people that's participating in it starts to get to know who they are, how they communicate. And what I love about what the mini provided is access to teachers that can support the program ongoingly. So we can tag each other in, right? What it also provides is that, like just because the teacher is absent doesn't mean this program can't continue on, because most of us are trained. If we do our job right, and we will, the students are going to be leading the show anyway.
Right.
But, legally, we need to have an adult in the room. But it would be nice that the adult knows what's going on as well. So all these things, and to well trained, to be respected, for our time to be respected. There was a lot of things that was folded into our coursework that reminded us that we were professionals, that you know, that we can't just skip over. I mean, that must be acknowledged. And so I thank you, and just thank you for what you and your team provided, Shaune.
You guys are most welcome. We're excited for the next phase at Fairfax High School, most definitely. Elisa is in the room. Elisa, do you have any questions for Freda or Sara? All right. Anyone else in the room have any questions for Freda or Sara? Okay. Well,
Sorry,
I will go.
this is Lisa. This is
Hi,
Lisa
Lisa.
Barrett. Hi. I am so glad, Sara and Freda, to hear from you all today. And I really liked what you were talking about in terms of building capacity for a school to sustain restorative justice and peer mediation work over time. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know there's a lot of organizations that come in and do like a one and done training and then they bug out. And we're more focused on the long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just this class of kids, but every class of kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think such a key piece is to help people feel like they're experts and then help people start to feel like this is work that they're working towards. I think that having Dr. Antoine and Mr. Gonzalez as leaders on our campus who have done the full ABC training and can say, yes, we've done this, now let's get everyone on board, helps people start to get involved in the work who might not otherwise have without hearing from their own teachers who they trust that this is worth doing. And I think that when there's just kind of a growing body of teachers with the similar practices, it's important. Like, for instance, out of this training, I started talking more with our school's PSW, who started leading a weekly restorative justice program in one of my classes with high levels of ditching and a lot of trauma. And so she's been coming in ever since we started meeting for the big training. And then today she couldn't come. And the kid said, Miss, does this mean we're not going to do art circle today? Are we not going to sit and talk about our feelings? And I said, do you really want to sit and talk about your feelings? And they said, yes, we've been looking forward to it all day. So I said, okay, our PSW might not be here, but we're still going to do this because this is important to you. And I think that idea of allowing teachers to see other folks on campus model things until they have the confidence to pick it up and go for it helps students feel like they're not dependent on one person to have their needs met. It makes them feel like it's a campus culture of care, not an individual who is caring.
Wow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sara.
That is beautiful. The power of allyship.
Freda, do you have anything to add? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to add is my experience around restorative justice, and the for LAUSD was an initiative, and it was a definite a need. But like many initiatives that we have, it has a shelf life of about 5, 6, 7 years, and then that is given, like, it's district wide, and they'll pay for it. And then after the 5 to 6 years, then it's up to the individual school sites to take that on, right? And so if the capacity, again, is not built, it falls apart. And I, as a teacher, was really counting on a restorative justice teacher to take care of my issues. And I can say that my husband, he has a restorative justice on his campus. And he took that model and started to create academic circles.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we had the mini on our campus and the training, that was really like my first time really like actually doing it, right? And even then I was still shying away from it. And then I team taught with Mr. Gonzalez this past week or 2 weeks ago, and I got to see him, and I chimed in. And I realized, well, he can't be in all my classes. I'm just gonna have to do this. And so I did. And when the students see my circle is already built, like around, they're like, yes, are we going to do the circle thing? And what I got from just building the norms is that it's a lifelong thing, right? Like having a norm of listening to understand, like, what would it look like if we started to do that more in the various sectors of our lives, right? And so I just got that getting on the court and actually applying these things and not just relying on one person makes a difference on the campus, right? And it just makes a difference in having conversations. What do you think, Sarah?
And I think that idea of building capacity in our students applies as well as with teachers. Like
Exactly.
there are some classes who will love our sort of justice circle from day one, where they'll be like, yes, I get to talk and I'm not getting in trouble, thank goodness. And there'll be other classes where students are intimidated about having everyone listen to them talk in personal ways. So in one of my classes last week, we did a restorative justice circle attached to a TED Talk where he talked about microaggressions and cultural representation. And there was one student who was like, yes, I've got this. This is my TED Talk soapbox. I will share my experiences with you. And a lot of other students just kind of sat and listened. And over time, as they saw her speaking with such confidence, they started sharing more. And then the next day, when we did a check on who was the wisest person you know, half of the class said that one student, because they're like, she was willing to talk and be brave. And so then the next time we did a circle, having seen the positive response that she got for speaking honestly and authentically, more students were open to talking in a way that they might not have had we not gotten used to this idea of let's try this thing, even if it's uncomfortable at first.
And so just to add to that, with teachers, they tend to shy away from these kind of things as well, because it's a new practice. It's not taught in school. You've been doing what we've been doing, and it's been working, right? But what the circle provided was you can utilize this in multiple areas of your teaching. And so when you start to marry what you know already with something that's kind of new, then it becomes a little bit easier. And then your relationship with your students starts to develop in ways that you didn't know was available to you. Right. And so what that reminds me of is that we were doing a academic circle. And if you don't mind me sharing, I was
No.
okay. So we were doing an academic circle and I wanted to turn things over on their head. And we did climate change, but I wanted them to understand the systems that kept climate change there. And one of the things I did is I had them listen to a TED Talk, but I had them listen to not TED Talk, it was a podcast from Brene Brown. And she was interviewing Dr. Clyde Smith. And what he was talking about Angola, and he was talking about the Louisiana jails and the fact that they were built on plantations. And they never knew this. And they did. Some kids knew about the 13th Amendment. Some of them didn't know. Some of them, it was like, so all these things starts to come out. And then I, connected it to, it's a plantation, which is a farm. And farm is one of the biggest contributors to global warming or climate change. And so they were like, their minds you can see them, like, even though they're in masks, you can still see their eyes moving. They start to like have these little questions. And then after class, some students that normally never stayed for the entire nutrition and then came back for lunch just to be there. But what was created out of having that circle was a safe space. And it was a space that they knew they can come. And what teacher doesn't want that?
Absolutely. Or what school community doesn't want that? Absolutely. Well, ladies, this has been absolutely amazing having this conversation with you. And I hope everyone viewing us was able to learn something and something resonated with you in this conversation. So we're actually